And with that, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau made what felt like an inevitable announcement. He's out after losing the support of his caucus. The race to replace him started just hours after he made those comments. Former Quebec Liberal MP Frank Kapelos is the first to officially throw his hat into the race.
Many people across the country have been talking to me about, literally since the day I chose not to run again, so in 2019, that they were looking for what I would say a business-oriented type of leadership for our party, and one that would look to do fiscally responsible approach to running the government, help our industries. I think my success in business is something that appeals to a lot of people, and seeing can we bring that to the federal government.
Opposition parties collectively aren't buying a new face at the top of the party changes anything. Here's the Tories' House Leader, Andrew Shear.
Canadians need a carbon tax election so we can put an end to all the misery and suffering and all the chaos that Justin Trudeau has selfishly put our country in. To consider the fact that Canadians don't even know when the new Prime Minister will be chosen or what process. This is all to be sorted out when we're just less than 2 weeks away from an incoming U.S. administration with these tariffs threatening our country. Once again, Justin Trudeau and the Liberals have proven that they put themselves ahead of the Canadian people. Nothing will change with a Liberal leadership race.
Liberal caucus is also set to meet tomorrow right here in Ottawa to discuss the next steps in the leadership race. What are they and who might succeed in replacing Justin Trudeau? Let's bring back the front bench. Brian Gallant, Lisa Raitt, Tom Mulcair, and Rob Benzie. Brian, I'll start with you. We started off there with the Prime Minister's clip. I haven't, had the opportunity to get everyone's perspective yet on his decision to step aside. I described it as inevitable because it certainly felt that way since Chrystia Freeland quit. Do you think it was?
Yes, it wasn't necessarily the day of Freeland's resignation that I would have called it inevitable, but I think as we saw the various regional caucuses come out and say that they were having a consensus majority, however they worded it, that he should go, I think at that point it became untenable. It just was very clear. Now, I think months ago I heard Benzie on a panel saying that after the by-election in Toronto, it was probably pretty evident. So I think those are all true as well. But when it really became inevitable, I think it was no longer a choice to be made. It was being thrusted upon him when the caucuses were coming out. And look, I think the process moving forward is, to Andrew Shear's point, it certainly is confusing. But one would think that it's pretty straightforward in some regards, in the sense that March 24th or very shortly thereafter, the government's going to fall. It's pretty clear. Even the Prime Minister says he'll no longer be the leader. So I think it would have to be before that. And obviously with a short race, you have to look at the rules and you have to set it up in a way that it can make the most sense for members and of course for people to sort of vie for the position. So we'll see what they end up deciding with. But I think I'm taking it for granted that it would be sort of early March at the latest, maybe mid-March, but very quickly. I mean, it's almost mind-boggling when you think about it, because who's going to say today, I want to run for the Liberal Party when they don't even know who the leader is, right? So you can't recruit candidates. Fundraising is obviously going to go more to leadership campaigns than anything. You can't write a platform. So you definitely need the new leader, whoever that person will be, to have more than 48 hours to get ready. So certainly I think the one thing I'm banking on is that they'll decide to have it early March, if not earlier.
Right. There are some people like, for example, Lisa, Melanie Joly, François-Philippe Champagne, Jonathan Wilkinson, Anita Anand, Dominic LeBlanc, Christy Clark, Mark Carney, Chrystia Freeland, who have all said in one way or another that they're considering this. When you look at that list of names, is there anyone you think could actually make a dent in what we've spoken about for the last year and a half in so far as the public opinion polling goes, like in how far back the Liberals have been?
Absolutely not.
Okay, moving on. What do you really think? No.
And I say that hesitantly because, of course, I am friends with a number of those people. But I think the one thing that Mr. Trudeau has done is he has allowed himself to live in this state of disbelief the fact that he was going to lose the next election, and that has caused a whole bunch of problems for us as a nation. He stuck around too long. He's the party guest goer that didn't leave until the lights were turned on and somebody started using a broom around him, and didn't take the hint. And he should have been gone. And now it's problematic. And now we're all going to lose sleep because of it. But the reality is that I'm very vexed with how quickly this race is going to unfold. Very concerned. I don't know what the rules are. We should all know what the rules are, especially around who's voting. I think that's very important because they are voting for the Prime Minister of Canada. This Liberal membership is going to be determining who the next Prime Minister is. And as a Canadian citizen, I have a right to know exactly what they're planning. And just to lift the curtain a little bit on what happens, the machinations in these leadership races, because I've been in one and I managed one. Mm-hmm. Trust me when I say that the committee that's in charge with making the rules up are being lobbied heavily by the interested candidates to make sure that the process goes in their direction. Now, I don't know what that means. I don't know who thinks what is going to be beneficial to them. But, you know, I'm very, very much aware of the fact that the Liberals have taken a very expansive view on what the terminology ordinarily resident in Canada means, meaning that includes international students, people who are 14 years of age, and temporary foreign workers who have no permanent attachment to Canada can vote and determine who the next Prime Minister is. So, yeah, I care about it. And I think we've got something that we have to watch extremely carefully.
Tom, what's your view on that? So far early,
we're still going to beat them. We're still going to beat them in the election. But it's still, they're still going to be Prime Minister for approximately 6 weeks. And that matters.
Let me pick up on that question because Liberals contend, certainly yesterday in the wake of the news, Tom, that this delivers to the Conservatives the election they didn't want, a.k.a. not against Justin Trudeau. Conservatives contend it doesn't matter. You're all one in the same, and we're going to put our ad money behind convincing Canadians, if they're not already convinced, that that's the case. Who do you think will win that argument, and what will kind of inform the answer to that?
Well, the Conservatives have been speaking out of both sides of their mouth on this one because over the weekend in Quebec, as one example, Pierre Poilievre sent out his very capable Quebec lieutenant, Vassy Kapelos, to do one thing on all the airways, attack a certain Mark Carney. Now, that to me speaks volumes about the fact that the Conservatives think that there's at least one person in that race who could be a game changer. And I've learned to respect the abilities of the Conservatives to dig deep, to have focus groups, to have polling, and know what the chances are of the various people. And for me, again, Vassy, that said so much. I really want to get in the fact that I agree wholeheartedly with Lisa on one very important issue. And this is not about the Conservatives who were in opposition coming up with their third or fourth race in such and such a time. This is about deciding the next Prime Minister of a G7 country, our country, that's under more pressure than we've ever been under. We've never been in a situation like this with someone like Donald Trump coming in. And it's a period of instability, and we needed more stability. But one of the things that the Liberals can do to remove instability is to at least be clear and transparent as to what the rules are going to be. You don't want this to break down into a food fight between the different camps. And I insist on the fact that I don't think that there's any debate possible around this. Any minister who throws their hat into the ring has to resign their position as minister.
Yes.
It's impossible to separate that individual and their function, as members of the Privy Council, making those decisions for all Canadians. You can't continue to do that. Everybody will be second-guessing everything you say as to whether or not it's your interest as a minister and therefore in Canada's interest, or it's your interest as a candidate. I think that has to be clarified immediately.
Yep.
Brian's unconvinced, but I have to get Rob in. I will say there's two ministers I spoke to yesterday, both of whom said something similar. They didn't want to be in cabinet with ministers who were running for leadership because they thought it would be, complicated on multiple fronts. I'll give you the last word, Rob, and we'll revisit it next week where, guess what, there's still be a Liberal leadership race.
Yeah. Two things I'd say, Vassy. First of all, today is it was 28 weeks ago today that this very front bench panel met the morning after or the day after the St. Paul's by-election, and we all thought that it was over for Mr. Trudeau then. We were 28 weeks early, I guess, ahead of the curve. But no, I would say I'm not sure. I agree with what I think Brian was going to say. I'm not sure that cabinet ministers do need to resign. I've covered leadership races provincially, and cabinet ministers didn't resign. When Dalton McGuinty resigned as premier, it was 5 or 6 cabinet ministers ran, and they didn't resign their cabinet posts, and that was an expedited leadership race. We've seen. I'm pretty sure Kim Campbell didn't resign from cabinet. Jean Charest didn't resign from cabinet in 1993 when they ran to replace Brian Mulroney. And of course, Paul Martin wasn't in cabinet when he was running to succeed Jean Chrétien, but Sheila Copps was, and I'm pretty sure she didn't resign from cabinet. So I'm not really sure if you, and especially if you have 10 of these cabinet ministers running.
Well, if they're all running, yeah.
If they're all running, who's going to
is.
replace them? I mean, as our friend Laura Stone said, Vassy, last night, they were already at the bottom of the barrel with the last shuffle.
God.
I mean, what are they going to do? I mean, who's going to be in cabinet? It's going to be quite crazy. So
Brian Gallant.
I would vote for Brian, and I don't vote in elections. But no,
he's going to be appointed right into finance.
Yeah, there you go. But this does, to Lisa's point though earlier, this does speak to. We are in a very grave, uncertain time, and I think that it would have been probably more responsible for the prime minister to appoint an interim prime minister, and then let say Dominic LeBlanc as interim prime minister, not running in the leadership race, and then have a leadership race that is separate and apart from that, because during this uncertain time, Danielle Smith talked about that she thought that Dominic LeBlanc would be the person she would like to see as an interim prime minister to get us through this rocky time with Trump before March 24th, the House resumes, and presumably a confidence vote that defeats this government.
My guess is Minister LeBlanc doesn't want it to be just in the interim, but that's just a guess. We'll find out soon. I got to leave it there. Thanks to our front bench. I appreciate it. Brian Gallant, Rob Benzie, Tom Mulcair, and Lisa Raitt.